This is a Rattle and Hum Sports podcast for Wednesday, May 8th, 2013. I'm Bryan Houston, and talking Cowboys with us right now is Rattle and Hum Sports Cowboys beat writer Matthew Postins. How you doing, Matthew?
Fine, Bryan. How are you doing?
Doing very well. We have not spoken to you since the draft was completed. We wanted to give you a chance to recover. Have you recovered?
This time of year is always pretty busy for anybody who covers the NFL. In fact, for people within the NFL, they're actually kind of decompressing the past couple of weeks. Scouts are working year-round to scout talent, especially at the collegiate level. So once the draft is over, teams usually give them a week or two to chill out, basically. But I would venture to say right now they're already breaking down tape for the 2014 class right now. But yeah, I've enjoyed not having to write 2-3 stories a day over the last few days.
Well, now that you've had your break, it's time to go back to work. Since we've last talked, Jerry Jones has made it sound like Tony Romo is going to start living at Valley Ranch on a 24/7 basis. What do you make of all that?
You know what? I think it's really kind of much ado about nothing. I don't know that Jerry was necessarily criticizing Tony Romo's work ethic or anything like that. I think what it really boiled down to is he was just trying to build an analogy as to say, this is what we Tony needs to continue to do. Prepare like a player like a Peyton Manning. I mean, you can't play quarterback at the level that Tony Romo plays at without seriously preparing year-round, and I have no doubt that Romo does that. I think, as usual, Jerry just chose the wrong words to express himself, which, if you cover the Cowboys, you get used to real quick. I don't make a whole big deal out of it because, like I said, you can't play quarterback at the level Romo plays at if you're not preparing year-round mentally and physically.
So you don't think he threw Romo under the bus with that announcement that by giving him the big bucks, now they expected a big money commitment from him?
I don't think so, because I think he's been giving them a big money commitment over the past few years. I think if anything, I think Jerry might have been trying to say, hey, it's not so much the commitment. We just need, we need him to refine what he does, especially in those big moments where he needs to make a big play. And it always seems as if Tony seems to make a mistake in those situations. I think Jones may have been alluding more to that than anything else.
So we don't have to worry about Tony Romo putting up his golf clubs then?
No, I don't think so. I think golf is a nice, relaxing activity for quarterbacks. Troy Aikman did it all the time and won 3 Super Bowls.
There you go. Perfect analogy. Now, there is the talk, though, because during that press conference, that conference call that Jerry Jones made, he talked about the fact that he wanted Romo much more actively involved in not only the game plan, obviously studying a lot more film. He wanted him to be very much involved in the development of the game plan. They have spent a lot of their draft picks on trying to, again, make it a Romo-friendly team. Dallas Morning News columnist Rick Gosselin says that he believes there's a huge danger in the Cowboys centering the entire franchise on Tony Romo now. What do you think of that?
Well, I could certainly see Rick's logic, especially when you consider, if Tony Romo were to get hurt, what do the Cowboys do? Well, Kyle Orton's your backup quarterback. Well, the problem there is Kyle Orton is a much different quarterback than Tony Romo, beginning with Romo's mobility in and out of the pocket. Kyle Orton is not a very mobile quarterback. He doesn't have as strong an arm as Tony Romo, nor is he as accurate. So there is an inherent danger in building the offense around Romo like that. If he's hurt for an extended period of time, then that really does change the complexity of what Jason Garrett can do as a play caller, what Bill Callahan can do as a play caller, if indeed he's calling plays, as a lot of us think he will be. It just changes a lot of what you do offensively. You see teams that are built around the quarterback. It's a quarterback-friendly league now. The guys that play at an extremely high level, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, on down the line, those offenses are tailored to those talents. And, I don't think there's a real inherent flaw in that philosophy as long as you have the right quarterback to execute what you want to do. If Jerry Jones thinks that Tony Romo is the right quarterback, then given where Romo is in his career and given the closing window that Jones seems to think this franchise has, that maybe it's time to go all in on Tony Romo for the next few years, get him as involved as possible, give him as many weapons as he possibly can, and see if they can ride that to a Super Bowl at some point. It's that kind of riverboat gambler, Jerry that we're used to. He's going to go all in on one guy, just like he went all in on three guys back in the 90s toward the end of the dynasty. It's a quarterback-friendly league now, like I said, and Romo is as good as they're going to get for the next few years.
But has he earned those skins on the wall that would necessitate Jerry Jones making that kind of statement and commitment to him?
Statistically, yes. Playoff-wise, no. But again, who are you going to get at this point? I mean, unless you want to trade half of your starting lineup to get a Peyton Manning or an Aaron Rodgers, you're not going to get a quarterback that's better than Tony Romo for the next few years, because either you have to trade away so many pieces to wrestle away an elite guy from another team to replace him, or you have to draft a guy in the first or second round next year, and it's going to take you a couple of years to develop that guy. So, Jerry's stuck in the middle area now. Romo's as good as he's going to get right now without having to just dismantle what he wants to do. So whether he deserves it or not, that's what he's got. And if you're Jerry Jones, you've realized that, you've dealt with that, you're going to do the best you can with that, and you're going to give Romo the opportunity to do everything he can to get you back to the playoffs and back to potentially a Super Bowl.
Well, it also looks like it takes all the blame off Jerry and puts it all on Tony Romo's back if they fail to get there.
Well, I'm sure we could find some way to blame Jerry for this.
Oh, I would have no problem, but there might be other people that would feel differently about it.
Well, that really just goes along with the position. If you're the quarterback for any NFL team, inherently you're going to get all the credit and all the blame no matter what happens. So I think that I don't think that really plays a whole lot of. I don't think that plays a big factor. I don't think Jerry's looking to absolve himself of blame in this situation, or looking to put the blame on somebody else or throw somebody under the bus. He knows that the quarterback position is the most scrutinized position in the game, and he knows that those guys get most of the credit and most of the blame. So I don't really think that plays a whole lot of logic into what he's trying to do right now.
Okay, after such a concentrated amount of time that you spent covering the lead up to the draft and then the actual draft and then the post-draft, you've had a chance to let it breathe a little bit. What's your assessment of the Cowboys draft after having had a chance to kind of sleep on it for a few weeks?
I think in terms of the players they chose, I think they actually did a pretty good job. Just in terms of the players, I think Travis Frederick has a chance to be a very good center in the NFL. I think in fact their first three picks have a very good chance of being productive players in the NFL. I really like the Terrence Williams pick in the third round. I think that was great value. As you get farther down the line, I see guys that have talent that could be good fits. The cornerback from William & Mary, B.W. Webb, I think he could be somebody that could come in and contribute immediately. I think he has the skills to do that. So I give them a B for the talent, but the construction of the draft, I give them a D for two reasons. Number one, there was no reason to trade back to get Travis Frederick. Even if you did get the extra pick, and that extra pick led to a player that I liked in Terrence Williams, there was no reason to do it. They should have taken, somebody at that 18th pick, most likely Sharif Floyd out of Florida, and found a way to use him, even though he wasn't quite a fit for what they wanted to do on the defensive line. Then you come back and you take Frederick in the second round, and yeah, you don't get Williams in the third, but you've shorn up your defensive line and you've shorn up your offensive line, and you've gotten good value doing it in both rounds. So the talent, I like the talent. I didn't like the way they went about it and did it. I give them a D for the construction of the draft. So overall, the grade I give them is a C. Okay,
fair enough. And then as soon as the draft was over, the Cowboys immediately, like every other NFL team, went after undrafted free agents. Could you give us an assessment, give us some of the highlights of some of the players who may actually come in and have some kind of impact for the Cowboys as an undrafted free agent?
Well, I think that it was a very interesting class, as much for what they didn't do as what they did. What they didn't do is they didn't bring in another defensive lineman or offensive lineman, which I thought was very curious. Jerry has said all along, hey, I think we've got enough on the defensive line to be a very good football team this year. I look at that defensive line and I see 4 very good starters who are going to be playing in a new system, and a bunch of guys who haven't done much of anything besides Sean Lissamore right behind them. I think they could have brought in more offensive line guys too. But based on what they brought in, the guy that I think everybody really wants to get a look at this weekend at minicamp is Brandon McGee out of Arizona State. He's a linebacker, played on the outside for the Sun Devils. He actually ended up getting reportedly $70,000 in guaranteed money out of the Cowboys to sign as an undrafted free agent. That's more guaranteed money than any 7th-round pick got last year, if that is accurate. And the reason they're looking at McGee is because he's a player that they feel like should have actually been drafted on draft weekend, and he's a player that size-wise and speed-wise really fits into what you want to do in the cover 2. You know, the Cowboys have so many outside linebackers that are in that 240, 250 range, and that's really 240 is really borderline for the cover 2. You get into that 250 range, you're talking about converting these guys into defensive ends. It's debatable whether that's going to work, but at 5'11", 223, he really fits in with what you want to do with the cover 2 as far as the outside linebacker. You want them quick, you want them speedy, you want them to be physical. McGee is all 3 of those things. The Cowboys really wanted him and really thought he was going to be a good fit, and I think he's the guy that everybody wants to get a look at if you're looking at the undrafted free agents this weekend.
All right, one other thing that I saw that was kind of interesting was that I've read some reports where even the Cowboy scouts were questioning the way this draft went. Apparently, once again, it didn't look like everybody was on the same page, not so much about who they drafted, but who they passed on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people have questions, and it really boils down to this. It's not very often that a top 10 player on everybody's board.
And you're talking about Sharif Floyd.
So if I go about Sharif Floyd, on every board that I saw when they got down to the 18th pick, he was the only top 10 player left on anybody's board. You know, I'm ESPN, CBS, every mock draft board that I looked at, every big board, he was in the top 10. He was the only one left. I have to imagine that for most teams in the NFL, he was also in their top 10. So when you see a top 10 guy fall to you at number 18, to me, you pull the trigger, you make the pick, and you find a way to use that guy. I mean, what the Cowboys really needed was a young 3-technique player, like a Warren Sapp type player. That player really wasn't there because most people look at Sharif Floyd as a 1-technique, which is the position Jason Hatcher is likely going to play in the front 4. The 1-technique is more of a run stuffer than a pass rusher. And you know what? That would have been fine with me. If I'd have been a Cowboys fan and I had a guy like Sharif Floyd coming to Dallas, first-round pick, going to back up Jason Hatcher for a year and then maybe take over the position, I'd be just fine with that. And I think that's where the disconnect is when you see so many people criticizing this draft. It's, you know, here's a top 10 guy. It's like Aaron Rodgers when he dropped to the Packers at 22 several years ago. Rodgers was a top 10 guy to most people, and he dropped to 22. The Packers said, you know what, we have a quarterback, but hey, we're going to go ahead and take this one too. And they won a Super Bowl with him several years later. So there's a lot of logic to taking the value in that situation rather than trying to get cute like the Cowboys did by trading down, getting the extra pick, and picking a player that most everybody says you could have gotten in the second round.
Okay, fair enough on that one. Then the question is, and I've seen this question asked in several websites and sports pages, why don't the Cowboys consider defensive tackle a concern? I mean, you've got age there, you have no depth. What is it that they're seeing that the rest of the world is not seeing?
I don't see it. I mean, I don't know what they see. I got to be honest with you. And the thing is, you have a group of guys, depth-wise, that were drafted for a particular defense. They were drafted because they had qualities that fit into a 3-4. Well, now you're moving to a 4-3, plus you're moving to a cover 2. And the only players on that team that have any real experience in an NFL 4-3 defense are Bryan Price, who is at best a third-string guy, and there's one other guy whose name eludes me at the moment. But again, he's like a first or second year player who has barely played. So, I mean, you look across that defensive line and you look at the depth, and it really does make you wonder what they think they see that makes them think they're okay at the position. And I mean, you know, in all honesty, if you look at this offseason, their top free agent acquisition isn't a player. It's Monty Kiffin, the defensive coordinator, and Rod Marinelli, the defensive line coach, because it's going to be up to these two guys to figure out a system that works for the players that they have on the roster right now. You know, I'm sure they looked at tape once they were hired. I'm sure they looked at these guys on tape, and I have to assume that they said, hey, you know what, we can work with these guys. Otherwise, I can't imagine a scenario in which the Cowboys would not have made a move to help that position on draft day, as big a need as I felt it was, and as a lot of people felt it was.
I look at it as they told Monty Kiffin, hey, listen, we want you to make chicken salad, but we're not going to give you any chicken.
That's certainly possible. and to me, if that was the attitude they had before I took the job, if I were Monty Kiffin, I wouldn't have taken the job, because then you're just setting the guy up to fail.
Good point. All right. What do you know about the quarterback that they added to the roster? Aaron Corp used to be a USC quarterback, then played at Richmond for a short time. They signed him as a free agent.
Don't know much about him. Haven't really had a chance to dive into him, but you know, most teams will sign a quarterback or two this time of year for rookie minicamp, and in most cases, they're there really just to throw the ball around at practice to these wide receivers and running backs during drills. The quarterback that I'm actually a bit more intrigued by is Dalton Williams, the kid they signed out of, I think, Akron. He was actually at Stephen F. Austin for a few years. Had the misfortune of being stuck behind Jeremy Moses at quarterback, and he ended up transferring to Akron, had to sit out a year, and he had a very serviceable year with Akron. He's from Capel High School, which is right next door to Valley Ranch. If I remember correctly, he's got a very good arm. He's very accurate. He's the type of guy that you could bring in, maybe put on the practice squad, let him develop for a year or two. By no means is he a guy that I think will be a starter one day, but I think he has skills, and I think he was undervalued because he had to bounce around a little bit to find an opportunity to be a starter. But he was actually one of the top quarterbacks in the NCAA last year in terms of completions per game.
All right, let's talk about the offensive line. Any new developments concerning the Cowboys and whether they're going to keep or get rid of Doug Free?
Well, I think the longer they wait, the less their options are going to be in terms of whether if they want to bring somebody in from the outside, their options are reducing greatly. Bryant McKinney was signed the other day. Tyson Clayville, I think, is still out there, but he's talking to other teams besides the Cowboys. I think Eric Winston is still out there. It's very much a buyer's market right now if you're a team looking for a tackle, but the Cowboys aren't buying. And I think that gives Doug Free that much more leverage right now, because really the only other player they have that can play right tackle is Jeremy Parnell, whom we've talked about previously, a player who was actually a basketball player at Ole Miss before he played for Houston Nutt his senior year. Right now we're sitting at about 3.5 weeks away from when the Cowboys have to determine if they're going to make him a June 1 roster cut, because if they cut Free as a June 1 cut, then they can spread his cap hit out over 2 seasons as opposed to 1. So we're getting to that point in time where the Cowboys have to make a decision. And the longer they wait to make that decision, the more I think that plays into Doug Free's hands in terms of him staying on the roster for 1 more year.
And in the meantime, Anthony Spencer just sits and waits, because I know the Cowboys would like to sign him to a longer-term deal. It's a question of how much, I guess. What's the latest on that you know?
No movement that I know of, and I'll be honest with you, I have absolutely no problem letting Anthony Spencer sit there on a 1-year contract, and for this reason. Last year he had a huge year. He was probably the best overall defensive player on that team last year in terms of players that made it through the entire season. But he also had a career year in a year in which he was going into a walk year. So you have to think about whether or not he's going to play at that consistent a level year in and year out, because Spencer really hasn't shown that. Now, the defensive end, the left defensive end in the cover 2 doesn't necessarily have to get to the quarterback that much, but in terms of players that have played that position for Monty Kiffin in the past, he's a little undersized. In fact, I think he's either right at 260 or sub 260, which would make him by far the smallest defensive end I ever saw play for Kiffin. They had Greg Spires play that position for a few years, but Spires was in the 270 range. So I think there's a question in my mind of whether or not he's the long-term fit at that position. And if the Cowboys let him stay on that one-year deal, I don't really have a huge problem with that because Jerry, if Spencer is the right fit, he'll throw him the money next season. You know he will. But, to me, I know they need the cap space, but if I can get away with it, I might go ahead and let Spencer play out that second franchise tag and see if he really is the right fit for that left defensive end position.
Okay, last question. This has little to do with football, but it has a lot to do with Bryan and the company he's keeping. Apparently he's going to be doing a Fiat commercial with Charlie Sheen and Pitbull. Are these really the kind of guys that the Cowboys want Bryan hanging out with right now?
I doubt it. I doubt it. I hope Dez is getting a nice payday out of it because, with Charlie Sheen, you just never know where you're going to end up the next morning.
And how you got there.
Well, forget how you got there. You won't remember that. You just don't know where you're going to end up.
Oh, man. It's just something to keep us awake at night. That's the bottom line. All right. Well, Matthew, thanks very much for coming on with us today. What can we look forward to in the next few days from Rattle and Hum Sports and your Cowboys coverage?
Well, it's that strange time of year, like I said, where things kind of slow down a little bit. And for a football fan, you're really kind of at you see a little pinhole light at the end of the tunnel if you love football, because now you have rookie camp this weekend. You have players coming in on a more regular basis to work with coaches in an organized setting. You have organized team activities, and you have the mini camp, and you have training camp in July. So obviously we're all on Doug Free watch to see what the Cowboys decide to do with him. We're on offensive coordinator watch because we all want to find out if Jason Garrett's going to call plays or if Bill Callahan's going to call plays or if Wes Phillips is going to call plays. Nobody really knows at this point. We're also on Anthony Spencer watch to see if he gets an extension. There's plenty of news to go around, but it's really more about what is happening on the practice field right now. Seeing if any of these undrafted guys are going to get the opportunity to go to training camp. Seeing the position battles that will really start coming into focus, like at right tackle. Whether Free stays or not, there will be a battle at right tackle. There will be a battle at strong side linebacker. There will be a battle at choice position spots down the roster, cornerback, safety, defensive end, in terms of who's going to be the second and third guys at those positions. So lots of things to keep an eye on, and we'll try and keep you apprised as best we can.
Sounds great. Matthew Postins, thanks very much for coming on with us.
Thanks, Bryan. Appreciate it.
Matthew Postins covering the Cowboys for Rattle and Hum Sports. This is a Rattle and Hum Sports podcast. I'm Bryan Houston. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.